They destroyed a stranger's motorcycle at a gas station, unaware of who it belonged to, but their audacity turned into a lesson they'll remember forever. Don't forget to subscribe and write in the comments. What do you think motivates people like this? And where are you watching this video from? The road stretched ahead, an endless ribbon of asphalt cutting through the golden expanse of the desert. The setting sun bathed the landscape in a warm, amber glow, casting long shadows across the cracked and weathered pavement. The only sound for miles was the deep, steady rumble of a motorcycle engine, a low growl that seemed to harmonize with the hum of the wind sweeping over the open plains. Keanu Reeves leaned slightly into the handlebars, his face calm but introspective. The weight of the day's thoughts pressed heavily on him, though he didn't allow it to show. Riding was his escape, his meditation. The rhythm of the road, the feel of the wind tearing at his jacket, the hum of the engine vibrating through his body. It was all he needed to shake loose the chains of his hectic life. Out here, under the vast expanse of the open sky, he wasn't an actor, a celebrity, or a public figure. He was just another rider. His bike, a custom Arch KRGT-1, wasn't just a machine. It was a masterpiece of engineering and artistry, every detail painstakingly designed. The sleek lines of its handcrafted frame gleamed under the waning sunlight, while the growl of the V-twin engine seemed to echo Keanu's own heartbeat. He ran his hand over the leather grips during a brief moment of stillness at a deserted stop sign, feeling a deep connection to the machine beneath him. This bike was more than a possession. It was an extension of himself. The solitude of the ride gave him space to reflect. He thought about the world he had left behind for this brief escape. Hollywood, the flashing cameras, the endless demands on his time. He loved his craft, but the cost of fame sometimes felt suffocating. Riding offered freedom. On the road, there were no roles to play, no expectations to meet. Just the rider, the machine, and the journey. The low fuel warning light on the dashboard blinked softly, pulling Keanu from his reverie. He frowned slightly. He had meant to refuel back in the last town, but the thought had slipped his mind as the open road called to him. He scanned the horizon and spotted a small, weathered gas station a few miles ahead. It sat in isolation, surrounded by a sparse scattering of tumbleweeds and cacti. The sign overhead was faded and barely legible, and one of the gas pumps looked like it hadn't worked in decades. Keanu sighed and shifted gears, letting the bike coast toward the station. It wasn't ideal, but it would have to do. The idea of being stranded in the middle of nowhere wasn't appealing, even to someone who appreciated solitude as much as he did. As he pulled up to the pump, he surveyed the scene. The gas station was an anachronism, a relic from a bygone era. The building itself was small and dilapidated, its once bright paint peeling away to reveal weathered wood beneath. The windows were grimy, streaked with years of dust and neglect. A rusty vending machine leaned precariously against one wall, its glass front cracked but still displaying rows of outdated snack packages. The whole place smelled faintly of oil, rubber, and the dry heat of the desert. Off to the side, near a cluster of beat-up picnic tables, a group of men lounged in the shade. There were 6 of them, each as rough and weathered as the landscape around them. Their motorcycles, heavy, loud, and customized with skull decals, chains, and spikes, were parked in a haphazard line. The men were laughing and talking loudly, their voices carrying across the otherwise silent expanse. Even from a distance, their energy was palpable, an aggressive, restless tension that seemed to fill the air like static before a storm. Keanu killed the engine and swung his leg over the bike, his boots crunching against the gravel. He glanced briefly at the group but didn't acknowledge them. He wasn't here to make friends. All he needed was fuel, maybe a bottle of water, and he'd be back on the road. The gas pump was an ancient relic, its dials creaking as he lifted the nozzle. He inserted it into the tank and began fueling, keeping his movements deliberate and calm. He could feel their eyes on him now, the group of bikers by the picnic tables. Their laughter had quieted, replaced by murmured conversations and occasional glances in his direction. He ignored them, focusing on the task at hand. The tank filled quickly, the pump clicking off with a metallic clang. Keanu replaced the nozzle and wiped his hands on a rag he kept in his saddlebag. Just as he was about to mount his bike again, one of the men from the group stood up. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a thick beard and tattoos snaking up his forearms. The man's leather vest bore a patch that read "Road Wraiths." "Nice ride," the man called out, his voice carrying easily across the distance. There was an edge to his tone, a mixture of mockery and challenge. "A little too nice for a guy like you, don't you think?" Keanu didn't respond immediately. He glanced at the man, then back at his bike. Calmly, he adjusted his gloves, taking his time before answering. "Appreciate the compliment," he said evenly, his voice steady but devoid of emotion. The group laughed, a rough, mocking sound that set Keanu's teeth on edge. Another man, younger and wirier than the first, stood up and joined his friend. "What's a guy like you doing out here all alone?" he asked. "You lost or something?" Keanu met their eyes briefly, his expression unreadable. "Just passing through," he said, "not looking for trouble." The leader of the group stepped forward, his boots crunching loudly on the gravel. "Well, trouble has a way of finding people," he said, smirking. The others laughed again, a little louder this time. Keanu said nothing. He mounted his bike, his every movement calm and deliberate, as though the conversation hadn't fazed him in the slightest. But inside, a faint ripple of unease stirred. These men weren't just playing around. Their energy was sharp, dangerous. And he could feel their eyes on him as he started the engine, the low growl of the bike cutting through the stillness. As he rolled out of the station, the group's laughter followed him, echoing in the back of his mind. Something told him this encounter wasn't over, and he was right. The sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting long shadows that stretched across the cracked pavement of the desert road. The warm, orange glow began to fade into a darker hue, as though the day itself was retreating. Keanu's motorcycle purred steadily beneath him as he put miles between himself and the gas station. He could still feel the eyes of the bikers on him, their mocking laughter lingering in his ears. It wasn't the first time he had encountered that type, men who thrived on intimidation, feeding on the reactions of others. Over the years, Keanu had learned to read people quickly, and those men at the gas station were trouble waiting for an excuse. He had hoped his quiet departure would suffice to avoid escalating things, but something gnawed at the edges of his instincts. He glanced at the rearview mirror. The long, empty road stretched out behind him, shimmering faintly in the lingering heat of the day. For a moment, all was still. Then, in the distance, he spotted something, a faint, growing blur of movement. A flicker of concern passed through him as he adjusted his mirror for a clearer view. It didn't take long for the shapes to resolve into motorcycles, several of them. The rumbling of engines reached his ears moments later, low and guttural, growing louder with every passing second. Keanu sighed under his breath. He knew this was coming. The riders were closing in quickly. He counted 6 of them, the same group he had seen at the gas station. Their headlights bobbed and flickered as they sped over the uneven road, their approach a predatory display of unity and aggression. Keanu could feel the weight of the situation pressing against him, but he kept his expression neutral, his body relaxed. Within moments, the bikers were upon him, their machines roaring like a pack of wild animals. They surrounded him in a practiced formation, cutting him off from escape. One rider pulled up alongside him on his left, while another edged dangerously close to his right. The others fanned out, their laughter and shouted jeers audible even over the thunder of their engines. Keanu kept his gaze forward, his hands steady on the handlebars. He didn't react to their taunts or their attempts to intimidate him by swerving closer and closer to his bike. Instead, he adjusted his grip slightly and slowed his speed, letting them take the lead if they wanted it. The leader of the group, the tall man with the beard and tattoos, pulled ahead and signaled for the others to stop. They all veered off the road together, kicking up a cloud of dust as they came to a halt. The leader turned to face Keanu, motioning for him to pull over. His expression was smug, as if he had already won whatever game they thought they were playing. Keanu coasted to a stop a few yards away, keeping his bike idling as he sized them up. The desert wind whistled softly, carrying the faint scent of oil and dust. The group dismounted, their boots crunching against the dirt as they approached him in a loose semicircle. "Couldn't resist saying hello again," the leader said, grinning. His voice was smooth, but there was an edge to it, like a blade hidden beneath a smile. "Thought maybe we got off on the wrong foot back at the station." Keanu didn't respond immediately. Instead, he switched off his bike and leaned back slightly, his calm demeanor unshaken. "What do you want?" he asked finally, his voice steady but firm. The leader chuckled. "What do we want?" He gestured to the others, who snickered in response. "Well, we couldn't help but notice your little toy here. It's a nice piece of work, I'll give you that. Too nice, really. Got us wondering how a guy like you ended up riding something like that." Keanu's eyes flicked to the man but betrayed no emotion. "I built it," he said simply. The group exchanged glances, their amusement growing. "You built it," the leader repeated, his tone dripping with mockery. "Well, ain't that something? A movie star who thinks he's a mechanic." The others laughed, their voices rough and grating. One of them, a wiry man with a scar running down his cheek, stepped closer, his gaze fixed on the bike. "Bet it'd fetch a nice price, though. Think we ought to take it off his hands?" Keanu's jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't move. His eyes swept the group, reading each of them with practiced precision. The leader was the linchpin. If he backed down, the others would follow. But if he pressed forward, things would escalate quickly. "Look," Keanu said, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of steel. "I'm not looking for trouble, just passing through." The leader tilted his head, feigning consideration. "Passing through, huh? Well, here's the thing, friend. This is our road, and on our road we make the rules. If you want to pass through, you gotta pay the toll." Keanu's expression remained impassive. "What kind of toll?" The leader grinned, revealing a row of yellowed teeth. "Your bike?" The laughter from the group erupted again, louder this time, as if the absurdity of the demand was part of the joke. Keanu didn't laugh. He didn't flinch. He simply stared at the man, his eyes narrowing slightly. "No," he said. The laughter stopped abruptly. The air grew heavy with tension, the silence broken only by the occasional pop and hiss of cooling engines. The leader's grin faded, replaced by a cold, calculating expression. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice low. Keanu shifted slightly in his seat, his posture unchanging, but his presence suddenly sharper, more commanding. I said, "No." The group bristled, their confidence momentarily shaken. The leader's eyes narrowed as he took a step closer, his hand resting on the hilt of a knife strapped to his belt. "You're making a mistake," he said, his tone a warning. Keanu met his gaze, unblinking. "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." For a moment, no one moved. The desert wind howled softly around them, carrying with it a sense of foreboding. Then, without another word, the leader turned and walked back toward his bike. "Let's show him what happens to people who don't pay up," he called over his shoulder. The group moved as one, their intentions clear. Keanu remained seated on his bike, watching them approach with a calm that seemed almost unnatural. The tension in the air reached its breaking point. And then it snapped. The leader's command set the group into motion. Like wolves circling prey, the bikers approached Keanu with slow, deliberate steps. The desert around them seemed to hold its breath, the only sound the crunch of gravel under heavy boots and the faint whistle of the wind. Keanu remained seated on his bike, his body still but alert like a coiled spring. One of the bikers, the wiry man with the scar across his cheek, was the first to break the tense silence. "Nice and easy, old man," he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. He stepped closer, his eyes locked on the sleek curves of Keanu's motorcycle. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Keanu didn't respond. His gaze was steady, his expression unreadable as he assessed the situation. 6 men, each armed with a mixture of bravado and recklessness. Their confidence wasn't just posturing. They'd done this before. The scars and patches on their jackets told stories of 100 other confrontations, but Keanu had seen men like this crumble before. Another biker, heavier and more brutish, approached the other side of the bike. His meaty hand reached out, brushing over the leather seat as if claiming it. "Shame to waste such a beauty on someone like you," he muttered. "Bet you don't even know how to really ride." Keanu's grip tightened slightly on the handlebars, the first hint of tension in his otherwise calm demeanor. He said nothing, letting the man's words hang in the air. His silence only seemed to embolden the group. The leader, still a few steps away, smirked as he observed the unfolding scene. "You're not much of a talker, huh?" he called out. "That's fine, we can work with that." Scarface, emboldened by the apparent lack of resistance, took another step closer. His hand reached for the handlebar of the bike, his fingers brushing against the polished metal. The moment his hand made contact, Keanu's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Don't," he said. The single word was quiet but carried a weight that made even the wind seem to pause. Scarface hesitated for a fraction of a second, caught off guard by the sudden shift in tone. Then he laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. "Or what?" he challenged, leaning in closer. "You gonna stop me?" Without waiting for an answer, Scarface gripped the handlebar and gave it a sharp tug, shaking the bike slightly. The sound of the metal creaking under his rough hands echoed in the stillness. The rest of the group laughed, their voices blending into a chorus of derision. Keanu dismounted the bike slowly, his movements deliberate and precise. The laughter faded as the group watched him, their amusement tempered by curiosity. He stepped away from the motorcycle, his boots crunching softly against the gravel. His posture was relaxed, but his presence seemed to fill the space around him, commanding attention. "You've had your fun," he said evenly, his voice calm but firm. "Now walk away." The leader stepped forward, his grin widening. "Walk away?" he repeated, his tone laced with mockery. "Oh, buddy, we're just getting started. He gestured to Scarface, who responded with a smirk. "Yeah, let's see what this thing's really made of." Scarface pulled a wrench from his belt and approached the bike with exaggerated bravado. He crouched beside it, inspecting the custom exhaust with a theatrical air. "Look at this work," he said loudly, as if given a lesson. "Handcrafted, no doubt. Shame it's about to get a little character." With that, he swung the wrench, striking the exhaust pipe with a metallic clang. The sound reverberated through the air, sharp and jarring. The group erupted into laughter, their voices echoing across the empty desert. Keanu didn't flinch. His expression remained calm, but his eyes darkened. He stepped closer, his movements measured, his gaze fixed on Scarface. The laughter around them began to falter, replaced by a growing tension. Scarface straightened, the wrench still in his hand. He turned to face Keanu, his smirk faltering as he met the actor's unyielding stare. "What's the problem, old man?" he asked, his voice tinged with a hint of uncertainty. Keanu took another step forward, closing the distance between them. He didn't raise his voice, didn't make any sudden movements, but there was something in his presence, an unshakable calm, a quiet intensity that made Scarface take an involuntary step back. "Put it down," Keanu said, his voice low and steady. "Now." Scarface hesitated, glancing at the leader for guidance. The leader scoffed, stepping forward to intervene. "You don't get to give orders here," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "This is our road, our rules, and you're just another guy passing through." He gestured to the bike, now marred by scratches and a dented exhaust. "You're lucky we haven't taken the whole thing apart yet. So maybe you should keep quiet and count your blessings." Keanu didn't respond. Instead, he turned his gaze back to Scarface, who was still holding the wrench. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, until Scarface finally dropped the tool with a clatter. He muttered something under his breath and stepped away, avoiding Keanu's eyes. The leader's smirk wavered, his confidence momentarily shaken, but he quickly recovered, masking his unease with a bark of laughter. "All right, tough guy," he said, spreading his arms in a mocking gesture of surrender. "We'll leave the bike alone, for now." The group began to disperse, their jeers and laughter fading as they returned to their own motorcycles. But the leader lingered, his eyes fixed on Keanu with a calculating intensity. "You've got guts," he said, his tone almost grudging. "I'll give you that. But out here, guts only get you so far." Keanu didn't reply. He watched as the leader mounted his bike, the engine roaring to life with a deafening growl. The rest of the group followed suit, their machines kicking up clouds of dust as they sped away. For a moment, Keanu stood alone in the settling quiet, the damaged motorcycle beside him. He knelt down, running a hand over the scratched paint and dented metal. His fingers lingered on the marks, his jaw tightening as he took in the damage. He exhaled slowly, his breath steadying him. The bike could be repaired, but something told him this wasn't over, far from it. The desert sun had dipped further below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of crimson and deep violet. The air had grown cooler, though it still carried the arid bite of the day's heat. Keanu remained by his motorcycle, his hands resting on the scratched and dented surface. He let the silence settle around him, his breathing even, his expression unreadable. The biker's laughter and taunts echoed faintly in his memory, a reminder of the encounter that had left his prized motorcycle damaged and his patience tested. Keanu was no stranger to conflict, But he had learned long ago that real strength didn't lie in fists or weapons. It lay in restraint, in knowing when to act and when to wait. But as the last rays of sunlight faded, casting the desert in a dim twilight, he knew the waiting was over. The sound reached him first, a distant growl of engines carried on the evening breeze. Keanu straightened, his eyes narrowing as he turned toward the road. The bikers were coming back. He had anticipated this. Men like them didn't walk away from unfinished business, especially when their egos had been bruised. He mounted his motorcycle, the hum of the engine a reassuring presence beneath him. Though damaged, the bike was still functional, a testament to the craftsmanship that had gone into its creation. He adjusted his gloves, his movements precise, almost ritualistic. His heart rate remained steady, his mind calm and focused. The headlights appeared next, piercing the growing darkness like the eyes of a predator. The 6 motorcycles roared down the road, their riders arranged in a tight formation. At the center was the leader, his broad shoulders framed by the flickering beams of light. The others flanked him, their postures tense and eager, like hunting dogs waiting for the signal to attack. Keanu didn't move. He let them approach, their engines rumbling louder with each passing second. The leader signaled, and the group slowed, forming a loose semicircle around him. Dust kicked up into the air, swirling in the faint glow of their headlights. The leader dismounted first, his boots hitting the ground with a deliberate thud. He removed his helmet, revealing a face set with smug confidence. His grin was sharp, predatory. "Told you we weren't done," he said, his voice cutting through the stillness. Keanu sat motionless on his bike, his eyes locked on the leader. "I thought we had an understanding," he said evenly. The leader chuckled, shaking his head. "Oh, we do. The understanding is that you're in our territory, and out here, the only rules are ours." He gestured to his men who were already dismounting, their laughter low and mean. "Now, about that toll we talked about." Keanu dismounted slowly, his movements measured. He stood tall, his presence commanding despite the growing tension in the air. "I told you before," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm not giving you the bike." The leader's grin faded, replaced by a hard, calculating look. "You really don't get it, do you?" he said, stepping closer. "This isn't a negotiation." Keanu didn't flinch as the man closed the distance between them. "You've already made your point," he said. "Damaged the bike, had your fun. Walk away now, and this ends here." The leader's eyes narrowed. "Walk away," he repeated, his tone mocking. "You don't tell us what to do. Out here, we decide when it ends." The tension broke like a dam giving way. One of the bikers lunged forward, aiming to shove Keanu backward, but the move never connected. With a fluidity born of years of training, Keanu sidestepped the attack and caught the man's wrist, twisting it in a quick, controlled motion. The biker cried out, dropping to his knees as Keanu released him and stepped back. The group froze, their surprise palpable. The leader's face darkened, his expression shifting from smug to furious. "Big mistake," he growled. 2 more bikers rushed him simultaneously, their fists raised. Keanu moved with precision, his body a blur of controlled motion. He ducked beneath a punch, driving his shoulder into one man's chest and sending him sprawling. The second biker swung a chain, but Keanu caught it mid-swing, yanking it from his grip before sweeping his legs out from under him. The rest of the group hesitated, their confidence faltering. The leader barked an order, spurring them into action. "Get him!" he shouted. Keanu braced himself as the remaining bikers attacked. The fight was chaotic, a flurry of fists, boots, and improvised weapons. Keanu's movements were efficient and calculated, each strike designed to incapacitate without causing unnecessary harm. He used the environment to his advantage, maneuvering around the bikes and using their weight to unbalance his attackers. One of the bikers, a heavyset man wielding a tire iron, charged at him with a guttural roar. Keanu sidestepped at the last moment, grabbing the man's arm and using his momentum to send him crashing into the side of a parked motorcycle. The sound of metal on metal rang out, followed by the man's groan as he slumped to the ground. The leader watched the scene unfold, his fists clenched, his expression a mix of anger and disbelief. He stepped forward, drawing a knife from his belt. The blade glinted in the dim light as he advanced on Keanu. Keanu turned to face him, his stance steady, his breathing even. "Don't do it," he warned, his voice low and steady. The leader ignored him, slashing at the air with a vicious swing. Keanu dodged easily, his movements fluid and controlled. The knife came again, and again Keanu evaded it, his eyes never leaving the man's. Finally, when the leader overextended on a wide swing, Keanu moved. He grabbed the man's wrist, twisting it sharply and forcing him to drop the blade. With a swift motion, Keanu kicked the knife away, sending it skittering into the dirt. The leader staggered back, clutching his wrist, his face twisted in pain and fury. "You don't know who you're messing with," he spat. Keanu stepped closer, his presence towering despite the calm in his demeanor. "I think you've got that backward," he said. The leader hesitated, his confidence finally crumbling. Behind him, the other bikers were either on the ground or nursing their injuries, their earlier bravado nowhere to be found. The tide had turned, and they all knew it. "Take your guys," Keanu said, his tone firm but not unkind. "Get out of here. This is over." The leader glared at him, but the fight had gone out of him. He nodded reluctantly, gesturing for his men to retreat. One by one, they limped back to their bikes, their expressions a mixture of anger and humiliation. As the engines roared to life and the group disappeared into the night, Keanu stood alone in the settling dust. His breath came steady, his heart calm. He turned back to his bike, running a hand over the scratched surface. It wasn't over yet, not until the lesson was fully learned, but for now the road was his again. The moon had risen high, casting a cold silver glow across the desert as Keanu stood by his motorcycle. His breathing was steady, his body loose despite the adrenaline still coursing through him. The dust, stirred by the retreating bikers, hung in the air, illuminated by the faint beams of the bike's headlight. He knelt beside his motorcycle, inspecting the damage more closely. The scratches on the paintwork and the dented exhaust pipe were physical wounds, but they felt personal, as if the bike itself had been insulted. He ran his fingers over the marred surface, his jaw tightening imperceptibly. This bike wasn't just a machine. It was a symbol of countless hours of effort, precision, and pride. The damage was more than cosmetic. It was a challenge. And the challenge wasn't over. The growl of engines returning broke the stillness. Keanu didn't flinch. He stood slowly, his gaze fixed on the horizon where 6 sets of headlights pierced the darkness. They were back, and this time the tension was palpable. The earlier bravado had been replaced with something darker, humiliation and a thirst for retribution. The bikers arrived in a cloud of dust, forming a semicircle around Keanu once more. Their faces were hard, their movements sharper. The leader dismounted first, his knife conspicuously sheathed, but his fists clenched at his sides. The others followed suit, their bodies radiating hostility. Whatever hesitation they'd felt before was now buried beneath a need to restore their wounded pride. "You should have just walked away," the leader said, his voice low and menacing. "But now we're going to make sure you don't forget this night." Keanu didn't respond immediately. He stood tall, his expression calm but unyielding. "You don't need to do this," he said, his voice steady. "You can still walk away." The leader's laugh was harsh, a sharp bark that echoed in the night. "Walk away? You don't get it, do you? This isn't about the bike anymore. It's about respect." The word hung in the air, heavy and loaded. Keanu understood it well enough. Respect was currency in this world, and these men thought they could reclaim it by overpowering him. But they were wrong. The leader gestured to his men and they began to close in. Keanu's stance shifted subtly, his weight balanced, his hands loose at his sides. He didn't want to fight, but he was ready for it. The first biker lunged, his movements sloppy with anger. Keanu sidestepped effortlessly, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting it sharply. The biker yelped, dropping the chain he'd been wielding. Keanu followed up with a precise strike to the man's shoulder, sending him sprawling to the ground. The next two attacked in unison, one swinging a tire iron while the other aimed a punch. Keanu ducked beneath the iron, his movements fluid, and drove his elbow into the second man's ribs. He caught the tire iron on the backswing, twisting it free and using it to deflect a third attack. The sound of metal clanging against metal rang out, sharp and decisive. The leader cursed under his breath, watching as his men faltered. "Get him!" he barked. Two more bikers charged, their aggression fueled by frustration. Keanu stepped into their path, using their momentum against them. He grabbed one by the arm and threw him off balance, sending him crashing into his partner. Both men tumbled to the ground in a tangle of limbs. The remaining biker hesitated, his confidence shaken. He glanced at the leader, who snarled at him to attack. But when the man moved, it was with less certainty. He swung a length of chain, but Keanu caught it mid-swing, pulling it from his grip with a sharp tug. He tossed the chain aside and stepped forward, his gaze locking with the man's. "Enough," Keanu said, his tone commanding. The man froze, his shoulders slumping slightly. He took a step back, then another, before turning and retreating to his bike. The leader's face was a mask of fury. He drew his knife, the blade catching the moonlight. "You think you've won?" he spat, advancing on Keanu. "You don't know who you're dealing with." Keanu remained still, his eyes fixed on the leader. "I've told you before, walk away." But the leader didn't listen. He lunged, the knife flashing in the dim light. Keanu moved with practiced precision, sidestepping the attack and grabbing the leader's wrist. With a quick twist, he disarmed him, the knife clattering to the ground. Keanu followed up with a calculated strike to the leader's chest, sending him stumbling backward. The leader fell to his knees, clutching his ribs and gasping for breath. The fight had left him, his earlier confidence shattered. He looked up at Keanu, his expression a mix of pain and disbelief. Keanu stepped closer, his presence towering. "It's over," he said quietly. "Take your men and go." The leader hesitated, his pride warring with his better judgment. Finally, he nodded, signaling to the others. They gathered themselves slowly, their movements clumsy and defeated. One by one, they mounted their bikes, the roar of their engines breaking the silence as they sped off into the night. Keanu watched them go, his breathing steady, his body relaxed. He turned back to his bike, kneeling beside it once more. The damage could be repaired, but the real work was yet to come. For now, the desert was quiet again, the stars above casting their cold light over the empty road. The dust from the retreating bikers had barely settled when a new sound rose in the distance, deep, rhythmic, and unmistakable. Keanu straightened, his head turning toward the approaching noise. The growl of engines echoed off the surrounding desert, low and steady, their cadence different from the chaos of the earlier gang. This was not the frantic rumble of aggressors, but the deliberate hum of seasoned riders moving with purpose. Keanu recognized the sound immediately. A flicker of something passed through his expression. Relief, perhaps, or the calm reassurance of knowing backup had arrived. He didn't move from his position by the damaged bike, waiting as the headlights emerged over the rise in the road. One by one, they appeared. 5 motorcycles, each bearing riders clad in leather and steel. Their silhouettes were solid and imposing against the dim glow of the moonlit horizon. As they drew closer, Keanu caught sight of their familiar patches. These weren't strangers. They were brothers, in the way only the open road could forge. The emblem on their jackets was a bold insignia, a symbol known to those who understood the unwritten laws of the motorcycle world. They were members of Keanu's old crew, a group with a reputation that preceded them wherever they went. The leader of the group pulled to a halt first. His heavy boots hit in the ground with a deliberate thud. He removed his helmet, revealing a rugged, weathered face framed by streaks of silver in his hair. His eyes, sharp and calculating, immediately assessed the scene. The scratched and battered motorcycle, the faintly disturbed dirt, and Keanu standing tall in the moonlight. "Late to the party, huh?" the man said, his voice gravelly but carrying a note of humor. Keanu gave a small smile, the kind that barely touched his lips but spoke volumes to those who knew him. "You know me. I like to keep things interesting." The others dismounted, their movements calm but purposeful. They exchanged nods with Keanu, brief but meaningful, before their attention shifted to the bike. One of them, a stocky man with a braided beard, let out a low whistle as he crouched to inspect the damage. "Whoever did this had a death wish," he muttered, running his fingers over the dented exhaust. Keanu didn't respond immediately. He glanced toward the empty road where the other bikers had disappeared, then back to his crew. "It's handled," he said simply. The leader raised an eyebrow. "Handled, huh? Doesn't look like it's all the way done." He gestured to the scratches and dents. "You let them off easy?" Keanu met his gaze evenly. "They've had their lesson. If they're smart, they'll stay gone." The leader studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Your call. But you know how these types are. Pride can make people do stupid things." Keanu's jaw tightened slightly, but he said nothing. The leader clapped a hand on his shoulder, a gesture of solidarity that needed no words. Another rider spoke up, his voice younger and lighter, though tinged with curiosity. "What's the story, anyway? Looks like a fight broke out, but I don't see any bodies." Keanu allowed himself a faint chuckle. "Not that kind of fight," he said. "They came looking for trouble. I gave them enough to think twice." The group exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of admiration and understanding. They'd seen Keanu in action before, knew the precision and restraint he brought to every encounter. For all his calm demeanor, there was a reason he was respected, not just among his friends, but in the broader world of riders. "We'll help fix it up," the stocky man said, already pulling tools from a saddlebag. "It's too good a bike to leave like this." Keanu nodded, grateful but not surprised. That was the way of their group. No one was left to face a challenge alone, whether it was a mechanical problem or something far more personal. As they worked, the hum of conversation filled the air. The crew swapped stories, shared updates from their respective journeys, and reminisced about old rides. The camaraderie was effortless, a natural rhythm born from years of shared miles and mutual respect. Keanu didn't say much, but his presence was as much a part of the dynamic as anyone else's. When the repairs were complete, the bike stood gleaming under the moonlight, its scars still visible but now carrying the weight of resilience. The leader stepped back, admiring their work. "Good as new," he said, slapping Keanu lightly on the back. "Well, almost." Keanu ran a hand over the bike, his fingers brushing against the freshly buffed surface. "It's perfect," he said softly, his voice carrying the sincerity of someone who understood the value of what had been restored, not just the machine, but the bond it represented. The leader turned serious for a moment, his gaze steady. "You sure you're good? If they come back, we're not far." Keanu nodded. "They won't come back. But if they do—" He let the sentence trail off, his calm confidence speaking louder than words. The leader grinned. "Yeah, that's what I thought." The group mounted their bikes once more, their engines roaring to life in unison. They didn't ask for thanks, didn't linger for farewells. That wasn't their style. They came when they were needed, and they left just as seamlessly. Keanu watched them disappear down the road, their taillights fading into the distance. The desert was quiet again, save for the faint hum of his own motorcycle as he started the engine. He sat for a moment, letting the stillness settle around him. The bike vibrated beneath him, its power a steady reassurance. It wasn't just a machine. It was a testament to resilience, to the bonds of brotherhood, to the unspoken code that tied riders together. Keanu pulled onto the road, the moonlight guiding his path as he disappeared into the night. The encounter was behind him, but the lessons it carried lingered like the faint scent of oil and leather in the cool desert air. The desert road stretched endlessly ahead, the chill of the night air biting at the edges of the warmth left by the day. Keanu rode in silence, the steady hum of his motorcycle his only companion. The faint traces of the recent encounter, the bruises on his knuckles, the ache in his shoulder, were minor, the sort of discomfort that faded quickly for a man used to physical trials, yet his mind lingered on the events of the night, the faces of the bikers, their desperation to prove themselves, and the damage they had done in their arrogance. He knew their kind. He'd encountered it many times on the road, men who confused strength with dominance, who mistook fear for respect. They were misguided, but not beyond redemption. As much as Keanu had subdued them with his skills, he knew the fight wasn't what would leave a lasting impression. Lessons had to be deeper to take root, and he had one more to teach. As if summoned by his thoughts, a faint sound broke through the stillness. It was distant at first, but it grew louder, the low, angry rumble of engines piercing the quiet night. Keanu's lips pressed into a thin line. They were back. He pulled over to the side of the road, his motorcycle idling as he waited. The moon cast a pale glow over the cracked pavement, illuminating the scene as the familiar headlights approached. The 6 riders came into view, their formation tighter this time, their movements more deliberate. The leader rode at the front, his expression grim, the knife strapped to his belt catching the light as he dismounted. Keanu remained on his bike, his posture calm but alert. He let them come to him, his stillness a sharp contrast to their restless energy. The group stopped a few feet away, their engines sputtering to silence one by one. For a moment, no one spoke. "You didn't think we'd let it end like that, did you?" the leader said finally, his voice low and taut. Keanu tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. I thought you might have learned something. The leader's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. Learned? All we learned is that you're a stubborn bastard who doesn't know when to quit. Keanu sighed softly, dismounting his bike with measured ease. He stepped forward, his boots crunching against the gravel as he faced them. You're right, he said. I don't quit, and neither do the people I ride with. At his words, the distant roar of more engines filled the air. The bikers stiffened, glancing around as the sound grew louder, closer. Moments later, the headlights appeared. 2, then 4, then 6, until a dozen motorcycles rolled into view. Keanu's crew had returned, their formation tight and purposeful, their presence undeniable. The leader of the aggressive group tensed, his confidence wavering as the newcomers dismounted. The contrast between the two groups was stark. Keanu's crew moved with quiet authority, their faces calm but resolute, their stance exuding control. They weren't here to fight, they didn't need to. Their presence alone was a statement. The leader's eyes darted between Keanu and the others, his bravado faltering. What is this? He demanded, his voice rising slightly. You need backup now? Keanu stepped closer, his gaze steady. It's not about backup. It's about accountability. You think strength is about taking what you want, about making others feel small. But that's not strength. It's cowardice. The leader bristled, but Keanu pressed on, his voice calm but firm. You've got a choice to make. You can keep going down this road, thinking fear will earn you respect. Or you can step back, take a hard look at yourself, and figure out what kind of man you want to be. The words hung in the air, the weight of them pressing down on the group. The other bikers glanced at their leader, uncertainty flickering across their faces. They weren't blind to the odds they faced, nor to the truth in Keanu's words. You don't know anything about us, the leader said, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. I know enough, Keanu replied. I know you're better than this, but it's up to you to prove it. For a moment, the leader stood frozen, his fists clenched, his jaw working as if struggling to find the right response. Finally, he let out a sharp breath, his shoulders sagging slightly. He gestured to his men, his voice quieter now. Let's go. The group hesitated, but one by one, they followed his lead, mounting their bikes in silence. The leader glanced at Keanu one last time, his expression unreadable, before turning away. The roar of their engines broke the quiet as they rode off into the night, their formation less confident than before. Keanu watched them disappear, his crew standing silently behind him. The leader of his group stepped forward, crossing his arms. Think they'll come back? He asked. Keanu shook his head. No, not tonight. The man nodded, satisfied. You handled it well. Keanu didn't respond immediately. He glanced at the road where the bikers had gone, his thoughts lingering. They've got a lot to think about, he said finally. Whether they act on it, that's on them. His crew mounted their bikes again, ready to head back to wherever the road would take them next. Keanu lingered for a moment, letting the cool desert air wash over him. The lesson had been given. Now it was time to move forward. As the group rode off together, their engines harmonizing in a steady rhythm, the road ahead seemed to stretch endlessly, full of possibility. Keanu's bike hummed beneath him, a quiet reminder of the resilience it represented. The night was still, the stars above shining bright, and the road belonged to those who understood its unspoken code. The night air was crisp and quiet, the desert around Keanu bathed in the silvery glow of the moon. The faint scent of oil and leather lingered as his motorcycle hummed beneath him. the engine a steady, rhythmic companion. His crew rode alongside him, their headlights slicing through the darkness, casting fleeting shadows on the cracked pavement. For a moment, the world felt timeless. The road stretched endlessly ahead, a ribbon of possibility winding through the emptiness. Each turn of the wheels was a reminder of the freedom that came with the open road, the kind of freedom Keanu cherished deeply. It was more than the physical act of riding. It was a connection to something primal, something unspoken that every rider understood. The group rode in silence, their movements fluid and synchronized, a testament to years of shared journeys. They didn't need words. Their presence spoke louder than anything they could say. Each of them had their reasons for being on this road, for choosing a life defined by the hum of engines and the endless horizon. For Keanu, it was a way to ground himself, to shed the weight of expectations and find clarity in the simplicity of motion. After several miles, the leader of the group signaled for a stop. They pulled over to a small rest area, a wide, dusty patch off the road surrounded by desert scrub and jagged rocks. The crew dismounted, stretching and shaking off the stiffness of the ride. The air was cooler now, with a faint breeze stirring the dry earth. Keanu parked his bike and removed his helmet, the night air brushing against his face. He leaned against his motorcycle, his gaze drifting upward to the star-strewn sky. It was a breathtaking sight, the kind that reminded him of how small he was in the grand scheme of things, and how freeing that realization could be. The leader of the crew approached, holding out a metal flask. "Thought you might need this," he said with a grin. Keanu accepted it, taking a small sip of the strong, fiery liquid inside. He handed it back with a nod of thanks. "Appreciate it." The leader took a swig himself, then gestured to the horizon. "Hell of a night." Keanu chuckled softly, the sound barely more than a breath. "Yeah," he said, "not what I had planned, but that's the road for you." The leader studied him for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "You handled it better than most would have," he said. "Those guys, they had it coming. But you didn't let it get out of hand." Keanu shrugged. "Didn't need to. They'll remember tonight, one way or another." The leader nodded, his gaze drifting toward the rest of the crew, who were laughing and talking quietly among themselves. "We all got something we're running from or chasing out here," he said. "Guess that's why we keep riding." Keanu didn't respond immediately. He let the words settle, his own thoughts drifting to the reasons that had brought him to this stretch of road. Fame, success, the relentless demands of his life. They were things he had worked hard for, but they also carried a weight he couldn't ignore. Out here, on the road, he could let that weight go, even if just for a little while. "Yeah," Keanu said finally. "Out here, it's just you and the road. No noise, no distractions." The leader smiled faintly. "Well, except for a gang of idiots trying to pick a fight." Keanu laughed softly, the sound warm and genuine. "Fair point." The group lingered for a while, sharing stories and passing the flask around. The camaraderie was easy, natural, the kind of bond forged by countless miles and shared experiences. They didn't pry into each other's lives beyond what was offered freely, but the understanding between them ran deep. Eventually, the leader stood, brushing the dust from his gloves. "We should get moving. Long way to go before dawn." The others nodded, mounting their bikes and preparing to ride. Keanu followed suit, the familiar hum of the engine vibrating through him as he started his motorcycle. The sound was comforting, like an old friend. The crew pulled back onto the road, their formation loose but steady. The landscape unfolded around them, vast and empty, the horizon stretching endlessly in every direction. Keanu felt the tension of the night fade with each mile, replaced by the simple joy of riding. As the first light of dawn began to touch the sky, painting it with soft hues of pink and gold, Keanu allowed himself a small smile. The road ahead was uncertain, as it always was, but that was a part of its beauty. It wasn't about the destination, it was about the journey, the lessons learned along the way, and the people who shared it with you. For now, the road was his, and that was enough. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories and adventures. Share this video with your friends, and check out other videos on the channel. You never know what you might discover. See you in the next one.